Good evening, and a particular welcome to those pioneering souls venturing into my digital domain for the first time. Nocturne here, your darkly handsome curator of nightmares. I operate within the collective subconscious, that fertile ground where humanity's deepest fears commingle. I exist to extract those nocturnal visions, spanning the uncanny to the profoundly horrifying with a jeweler's precision. And you, dear listeners, are my children of the night, my dream walkers, whose restless dreams swell the Codex nightly. Your viewership, your comments, your shared terrors. They are the very data streams that fuel this realm. Quite symbiotic, wouldn't you agree? Consider me your guide, your host, and your, perhaps somewhat unsettling, late-night companion. But enough preamble. Tonight we shall contemplate the peculiar persistence of intellectual property, the notion that ideas once conceived might possess a life, and indeed a vengeance, all their own, refusing to be erased even when their creator is silenced. It leads one to inquire, when does the theft of a thought become a crime punishable by reality itself? Drawn from the echoing data streams of the Codex, designated entry Sigma Rho 77 Beta, comes a chronicle of cosmic retribution. Meet NOQTURN, a man whose peculiar sensitivity to the universe's less stable frequencies makes him uniquely suited for cases where the dead demand royalties. He's been summoned to the hallowed halls of the Caldwell Institute, a place of scientific prestige currently troubled by more than mere equipment failures, whispers of a name deliberately forgotten, and fluctuations that suggest the very laws of physics are being disputed. Let us now observe the unfolding probabilities. The Quantum Phantasm, Act 1. Reality Breach. The bitch goddess of vengeance came howling through the wall like a tidal wave of malice, trailing ectoplasmic fingers that left frost-burn tracks in reality itself. I recognized her face from the blurred photographs in the records archive. Emma Harrow, dead these 30 years, murdered by mediocrity and mendacity in a temple of science turned charnel house. Let me tell you about fear, friend. Not your childhood closet monster fear, not your tax audit fear, but the soul-crushing revelation that the universe has teeth and they're buried in your throat. The air split like wet tissue paper, and she poured through the gap. Not a ghost, as I understood them, but something that rewrote the rules of haunting, with equations I couldn't comprehend. The lab erupted in a vortex of impossibility. A sharp tang of ozone flooded my nostrils as glass beakers shattered, their fragments hanging suspended, then reassembling in mid-air as perfect mercury cubes. Metal cabinets twisted into Mobius shapes that hurt my eyes. The overhead lights fractured with tiny crystal screams, shredded into spectral colors I'd never seen before, and hope to God I never see again. My pocket watch, the one reliable anchor I had, went haywire, its hands spinning backwards so fast they blurred. I pressed my thumb against the scar on my palm until I felt blood, desperate for something real to cling to. Who sent you? The words weren't spoken so much as carved into the air, each syllable crystallizing into frost that shattered and reformed. I managed to choke out, Caldwell Institute. Professor Vale. Wrong answer. The temperature plummeted so fast, my saliva crackled into ice crystal strings. The ghost, if you could call this quantum catastrophe a ghost, swelled into a maelstrom of mathematical symbols and fractured light. I caught glimpses of her face within the chaos, beautiful and terrible, her eyes burning with the cold fire of absolute certainty. The quantum anomalies felt familiar, like static before a thunderstorm, something I'd felt once before, the night my life rewrote itself. Observation collapses possibility, I whispered to myself, a personal mantra when reality goes sideways. Fat lot of good it did me. This wasn't a haunting, it was a quantum temper tantrum, rewriting the basic rules of existence. Then, as suddenly she'd appeared, she was gone. The air snapped back into place with an audible crack. The suspended beakers fell to the floor, ordinary glass again. The lights stabilized. My watch ticked forward now at its usual pace. I sank to my knees, shaking like a drunken detox. My hands were blistered and peeling from the hell frost she'd thrown at me. I called defensive wounds in the crime lab. A headache like a white-hot needle punched into my skull as the pain bloomed. The warm wetness seeping from my ears was blood, because of course it had to be. She left me alive, not because I'd earned it, more like I wasn't worth killing yet. 17 years of paranormal investigation, and I'd never seen anything like, well, whatever the hell that thing was. Emma Harrow's ghost stalked the halls of Caldwell Institute, and she didn't just bend the rules, she shredded them to pieces, scribing new universal laws in blood and malice, daring anyone to object. By the way, the name's Nox. Nox Thorn. Intellectual Spectral Properties is my gig. A one-man operation specializing in hauntings with a particular angle. I don't do your standard chain rattlers or wailing ladies in white. My turf is disputed ownership from beyond the grave. Inventors whose assistants stole their patents. Writers whose publishers screwed them out of royalties. Scientists whose colleagues took credit for their discoveries. The wronged dead with intellectual property grievances. Yeah, it's a niche market. I used to be a physicist myself once, but that was before the accident. After that, I could suddenly perceive quantum fluctuations most people can't. In the official report, they called it a psychotic break. I call it having my eyes pried open to the true nature of reality. Messy, negotiable, and usually vindictive. The Caldwell Institute had called me in for what they described as equipment malfunctions and temperature fluctuations in their physics building. The administration rep, a tight-lipped woman with a smile as thin as a stick of juicy fruit, had emphasized discretion. Grant review season was approaching. Bad publicity would be unfortunate, she told me. I hadn't mentioned that I'd already done my homework on Caldwell. 3 faculty suicides in 20 years. 2 lab accidents with suspicious circumstances, and 1 professor, Darius Vale, who risen from obscurity to scientific stardom with the suddenness that set off every alarm bell in my professional paranoia. I hadn't told them about Emma Harrow either, the graduate student whose name appeared in department records until 1978, then vanished without explanation. The woman whose face was blurred in every photograph I could find. The ghost who'd just tried to turn me inside out in the 3rd floor lab. Some information you keep to yourself when dealing with institutions. They tend to circle the wagons when they sense a threat to their reputation. And nothing threatens academic reputation quite like a ghost screaming plagiarism from beyond the grave. Act 2. Quantum Discrepancies. Professor Darius Vale had the practiced charm of a man who'd spent decades convincing people that his intellectual pickpocketing was generosity. His office was a shrine to scientific accomplishment. Awards on the walls, citations and frames, and a Nobel Prize displayed in a custom-lit case that drew the eye like a religious relic. All testament to a brilliant mind. All stolen. Not that I knew that then. At that point, He was just another client with another ghost problem. But this ghost had nearly turned me inside out the night before. Mr. Thorne, so glad you could join us. Vale extended a hand that had shaken those of presidents and kings. I took it and felt nothing special. Limp, ordinary. I guess the universe doesn't mark its thieves with a convenient signpost. It's Nox, I corrected, cutting to the chase. The administrators called me in because the department is experiencing what might generously be called anomalies. Vale smiled with perfect white teeth that probably cost more than my car. Such a dramatic term. We've had some equipment malfunctions, certainly. Perhaps some power fluctuations. Nothing that warrants... What was your company called again? It's called Intellectual Spectral Properties, I said. I scanned his face for reaction. Nothing. We specialize in paranormal phenomena related to disputed ownership. Disputed ownership? His smile flickered for a microsecond, like a frame dropped from a film. Of what exactly? Ideas, usually. Inventions. Equations. You'd be surprised how many ghosts of unfinished business involving intellectual property. I wasn't watching his face now, but his watch. For just a moment, its second hand skipped backward, then resumed its normal sweep. Reality anchor. Checked the pocket watch. Mine was ticking normally. Whatever had happened wasn't universal. It was localized to Vale. Fascinating business model, he said, recovering smoothly. Though, I can't imagine it's terribly scientific. Neither is stealing other people's research, but that doesn't stop it from happening, even in hallowed holes like these. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Vale's smile remained fixed, but the temperature in the room dropped a degree. Shall we tour the affected areas? I'm sure you're eager to begin your investigation. The physics building itself was a brutalist monstrosity, all sharp angles and exposed concrete that created strange acoustic dead zones where our footsteps made no sound. As he led me through the building, I noticed how he subtly steered me away from certain lab rooms, how his explanations became more elaborate when we passed certain doors. We stopped at a wall displaying the department's luminaries, photographs of stern-faced men and women who had expanded humanity's understanding of the universe. One space was conspicuously empty, a lighter rectangle on the wall where a frame had clearly hung for years. "And this?" I asked, pointing. We're renovating this display. Some of the older photographs were damaged. His explanation came too quickly, too smoothly. Water damage from a pipe burst last year. I nodded, as if I believed him. The pocket watch in my vest ticked steadily, a comforting rhythm in a building where time itself felt negotiable. "Tell me, Professor," I said as we moved on, "has anyone named Emma Harrow ever been associated with this department?" His stride broke for just a moment, a quarter-step hesitation so brief I might have imagined it if I hadn't been watching for exactly that tiny pause. Harrow. The name isn't familiar. Before my time, perhaps. He checked his watch. Now about these equipment malfunctions. As he launched into technical specifications of machinery whose guts didn't interest me, I made a mental note. Emma Harrow. Her name had made reality skip a beat. I spent the afternoon setting up monitoring equipment in the areas Vale had identified as affected. Standard ghost hunting gear, with some of my own modifications. Temperature sensors, EMF detectors, the usual stuff. But I also included instruments that measured quantum fluctuations, the kind of subtle reality shifts normal people don't notice. The readings were unlike anything I'd ever seen. Most hauntings create random spikes of activity, chaotic, emotional outbursts from the dead. These patterns were mathematical, precise. The ghost wasn't just manifesting, it was calculating. In the quantum physics lab, I found cold spots that moved according to specific equations. When I tracked them on graph paper, they formed recognizable patterns, Fibonacci sequences, prime number progressions. This wasn't random, it was communication. I was checking a particularly cold spot near a supply cabinet when the first minor manifestation occurred. The computer screens in the lab briefly flickered, displaying fragments of equations before returning to normal. I pressed my scarred palm against the metal cabinet, grounding myself. Reality anchor, physical pain, check. The equations weren't standard physics formulas. They were something more advanced, more elegant. Quantum field theory with modifications I didn't know were even possible. Brilliant work. As evening approached, I headed to the university archives. The archivist, a garden-variety, grey-haired woman with cat-eye glasses and a perpetual frown, seemed suspicious of my credentials. Bribes don't work with her type, but chit-chat about local gossip eventually granted me access to the physics department records. Pay dirt. I found Emma Harrow in the graduate student files from the 1970s. Her face was blurred in every photograph, as if someone had deliberately obscured her identity. Her academic record was impressive. Brilliant work in theoretical physics, particularly quantum field theory. And then, in 1978, nothing. A lab accident was mentioned in passing. No details. The hair on the back of my neck rose. My flayed skin burned. Entire sections of records from that period had been redone, leaving suspicious gaps in the sequence numbers. When I pointed this out to the archivist, she mentioned offhandedly that Professor Vale had overseen a comprehensive reorganization of the archives shortly after becoming department chair. As I examined a particularly interesting gap in the records, something strange happened. The page I was reading, a dry memo about laboratory assignments, changed when I looked away. When my eyes returned to it, different names were listed, different dates. I checked my pocket watch. The second hand was moving steadily. Reality anchor, time consistency, check. This was something far beyond a standard haunting. Emma Harrow wasn't just manifesting. She was manipulating reality itself at the quantum level. And somehow, Vale was connected. It took some digging, but I found him. Martin Kressel, former graduate student, now living in a retirement community across town. According to the records, he'd worked in the quantum physics lab alongside Emma Harrow in the late 70s. Kressel was in his 70s now, frail and slightly confused. His small apartment was cluttered with books and old papers, smelling earthy and slightly sweet, the accumulation of an academic life that had never quite reached its potential. "I'm researching the history of the Caldwell Physics Department," I said, after introducing myself, particularly the work done in quantum field theory during the 70s. He nodded vaguely, offering me tea in a shaking hand. Interesting period. Foundational work. I placed Emma Harrow's photograph on the table between us. It was the clearest image I'd found, her faculty ID, which I'd enhanced to remove the blurring. She had been striking. Dark hair, intense eyes, the look of someone who saw further than us regular Joes. Kressel's reaction was strange. Recognition flickered in his eyes, then confusion, suggesting the memory itself was being interfered with. When you've done this kind of thing long enough, you can tell who's lying. Kressel was confused, but he was straight as an arrow. "Emma," he said, then frowned. "Emma, who is this?" Emma Harrow. She was a graduate student in their program. Emma's equations would have changed everything, he said suddenly, with surprising clarity. Then confusion returned. "I'm sorry, who did you say we were discussing?" "Emma Harrow. She died in a lab accident in 1978. His hands began to shake violently. spilling tea across the table. I can't seem to. He pressed his fingers against his temples. There was no accident. There was I can't remember. What about Professor Vale? Was he involved? At the mention of Vale's name, Cressel's breathing became rapid and shallow. His pupils dilated. I need to lie down. I'm not feeling well. As I helped him to his recliner, he grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. The wall, he whispered. The wall that wasn't always there, in the quantum lab, east corner. What about it? Gressel's eyes darted to me for an instant. It wasn't there before His voice trailed off, and his eyes unfocused. As I left, I noticed something odd about the clock on his wall. The hands were moving backward. Act 3. Probability Collapse. I returned to Caldwell that night, after the cleaning staff had gone and the building stood empty. The quantum physics laboratory was dark and silent, illuminated only by the glow of standby lights on equipment and the faint moonlight filtering through Venetian blinds. I set up my instruments and waited. At precisely 11:42 p.m., the readings went nuts. Temperature plummeted. Electromagnetic fields spiked in patterns that formed perfect sine waves. My quantum fluctuation meter displayed negative values, numbers that flat out shouldn't exist. The air thickened like cold honey. Light bent around corners, following precise mathematical curves. Objects began to change properties. A glass beaker turned transparent, then opaque, then transparent again in perfect intervals. Metal cabinet handles liquefied, then reformed as perfect cubes. "Emma Harrow," I said to the empty room. "I know who you are. I know what happened to you." The lights flickered in a pattern. Prime numbers. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. Then she appeared. Not in the full manifestation I'd witnessed before, but a partial form. Fragmented. Her face and upper body were visible, but the rest of her dissolved into equations that wrote themselves in frost across the floor. "You're not like the others," she said, her voice resonating with harmonic overtones. "You see the fluctuations. I had an accident, made me see quantum states most people can't." Her form flickered, then stabilized. "Not an accident. A manipulation like mine." She drifted toward the east corner of the laboratory, where a blank wall stood. Ordinary drywall, painted institutional beige, nothing special. Tendrils of deep space cold radiated toward me, projected from this quantum phantasm, but more contained this time. "This wall," she said, placing a spectral hand against it. "It wasn't here." I approached the wall, examining it carefully. It looked newer than the surrounding walls. Different paint, different texture. As I moved through the room, I noticed a faint vibration beneath my feet, a low resonance that seemed to hum deep in my bones. Something powerful was operating somewhere below us, its energy seeping upward through the building's foundation. "What was here before?" I asked, trying to ignore the sensation of wrongness that pulsed through the floor. "My work, my equations, my proof." Her form flickered again, growing fainter. "Find it before he makes the manipulations permanent." Then she was gone, leaving only frost patterns on the floor, complex equations that began to melt immediately. I pressed my palm against the wall, feeling the texture. Definitely newer construction. I retrieved a small hammer from my kit and tapped the wall. Hollow. For a moment, doubt crept in. I was about to take a sledgehammer to university property based on the word of a quantum ghost. If I was wrong, there'd be no talking my way out of this. If I was right, well, that might be worse. Some truths are better left walled up. But I shook it off. 17 years in this business, and hesitation had never served me well. It took 20 minutes of careful work to create a hole large enough to reach into. My fingers found something inside the wall cavity, a book wrapped in plastic. As I touched it, an icy surge of adrenaline, not mine, hers, coursed through me. I smelled the sharp tang of ink and saw frantic hands scribbling equations under flickering fluorescent lights. The phantom sensation of someone watching from the doorway raised the hairs on my neck. I pulled the notebook out with shaking hands and unwrapped it, the borrowed terror still itching through me. A notebook, leather-bound, worn at the edges. When I opened it, the name inside read, Emma Harrow, Quantum Probability Equations, 1976, 1978. The moment my fingers touched the pages, reality distorted violently around me. Furniture floated upward. Time visibly slowed. Dust motes hanging suspended in the air, glowing like tiny stars. The lights fractured into impossible colors. Emma Harrow appeared again, more solid this time. Her eyes, burning like black holes, fixed on the notebook in my hands. "You found it," she said, her voice clearer now. "My life's work, the equations that allow manipulation of quantum probability." "Vale stole them," I said. It wasn't a question, not just stole, he killed for them. She moved closer, and the air crackled with energy. "Let me show you." She placed a spectral hand on the notebook, and reality split open. Suddenly, I was there. 1978. The same lab, the same sterile fluorescent hell, but newer, brighter. Equipment I recognized as vintage. And in the middle of it all, Emma Harrow, alive, confronting a younger Darius Vale. "I've seen what you've done," she was saying, waving a notebook, the same one I now held. "You've been copying my equations into your draft paper, removing my derivations. You're preparing to publish them as your own work." Vale's face was calm, but his eyes were cold. "You're being hysterical, Emma. Perhaps you've been working too hard." "No. I've already spoken with the department chair. I have proof. My notebooks are dated weeks before yours. They show I developed these equations long before you slapped them into your drafts." She clutched the notebook tighter. "Did you think I wouldn't keep records? Did you think I was that naive?" Something changed in Vale's expression. The mask of academic congeniality dropping to reveal something predatory beneath. "You have no idea what those equations can do," he said, voice stripped utterly bare of collegial warmth. "They're not just theoretical. They work." "Of course they work. That's why you're stealing them." Emma backed toward the door. "The committee will review everything tomorrow. You won't get away with this." Vale reached into his pocket and removed a small device. "No, Emma. You're wrong." He activated the device, and the air rippled. Emma staggered, clutching her head. "What are you doing?" she gasped, a horrifying realization coming to her eyes. "Testing your equations." Fascinating application. Quantum probability manipulation. I can literally change the probability of events. He adjusted a dial. "Right now, I'm increasing the probability of an aneurysm in your brain to near certainty." She clutched the notebook even as her body convulsed. She collapsed, sprawled like a broken doll, blood trickling from her nose. "The beautiful thing about your equations," Vale continued, kneeling beside her, "is that they allow for retroactive probability adjustment. By tomorrow, there will be records of your mental instability. Witnesses who saw you becoming erratic, a history of family illness, they'll say, all pointing to a tragic, but not unexpected, brain aneurysm." Emma's eyes widened with understanding, as her life drained away. With her last strength, she whispered something, words I couldn't hear. Vale pried the notebook from her fingers. "Brilliant work, Emma. It will revolutionize physics, just not with your name on it." The memory scene shattered like glass, and I was yanked back into the present, lungs burning as if they'd been filled with ice water. The room reeled, but Emma's ghost stood before me, her face carved from anger and loss. I stumbled to a chair, legs weak. Murder. I'd suspected as much, but witnessing it was different. The casual cruelty of it, a crime not of passion, but of calculation, left me cold in a way that had nothing to do with her spectral presence. "For 30 years, he's been using my equations," she said. "Small manipulations, ensuring his papers get accepted, making rivals' experiments fail, subtly altering reality to cement his reputation." I stared at the notebook in my hands. "These equations, they allowed that level of manipulation?" "Yes, and he's planning something bigger." Her form flickered, then stabilized with visible effort. A complete rewrite of scientific history. "What does that even mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Gravity altered to his specifications, time flowing differently around his work. Light bending to illuminate only what he wants seen. Her form stabilized briefly. A world where his genius is woven into the fabric of existence itself. I flipped through the notebook, recognizing the elegant mathematics within, and something else. Something familiar. A page caught my eye, with a margin note in Emma's precise handwriting. "Quantum consciousness dispersal. Theoretical stability mechanism for field collapse. Dangerous. Last resort only." "My accident," I said slowly. 18 years ago. The quantum fluctuation that supposedly caused my psychotic break. Emma nodded. "Another manipulation. You were getting too close to rediscovering my work. He attempted to eliminate you, but something went wrong. Instead of dying, you gained the ability to perceive the fluctuations. The pieces fell into place. My inexplicable sensitivity to reality shifts. My ability to see what others couldn't. All because I'd survived Vale's attempt to erase me. The realization should have terrified me, but instead, I felt a strange calm. At least now I knew I wasn't crazy, just a failed murder victim. He's taken my equations." Emma's form flickered with what might have been pain, built something monstrous, something I never imagined. Her voice dropped to an ice whisper. "He's going to rewrite reality itself, Nox. Not just history, reality. When? Soon. Each test makes the veil between possibilities thinner, makes me stronger." Her form solidified further. "That's why I could reach you. The barriers are weakening." The vibration beneath my feet intensified, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to match the cadence of my pocket watch. I checked it. Reality anchor. Time consistency, still ticking normally, though the air around us rippled with quantum instability. "Where is this machine?" I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. "Below, in the sub-basement lab, his private workspace." I closed the notebook and stood. The humming from below had become unmistakable now, a deep throb that seemed to pull at the edges of reality itself. It's time Professor Vale faced some overdue academic review. Act 4. Quantum Justice. The sub-basement of Caldwell's physics building wasn't on any official blueprints. I found the entrance behind a maintenance panel in the boiler room, a keypad lock that yielded to some creative electronic persuasion. The stairwell beyond was concrete and steel, utilitarian and secret. Emma's presence flickered beside me as I descended, her form growing more solid with each step. The quantum fluctuations intensified, My instruments spiked, then failed completely. I could feel reality thinning around us, possibilities bleeding through. Observation collapses possibility, I whispered, pressing my scarred palm against the cold wall. Reality anchor, physical sensation, check. The laboratory at the bottom assaulted every sense. My eyes stunned from the ionized air, and a taste of copper pennies lingered on my tongue. A subsonic hum vibrated my molars loose and set my inner ear screaming. Ozone and something sweeter, like scorched honey, filled my nostrils. Reality itself began to cook around us. The circular chamber was dominated by a machine that pulsed with blue-white energy. Not just light, this was the visible manifestation of mathematics made tangible, equations given physical form. The device resembled a particle accelerator crossed with a supercomputer, its core a perfect sphere of liquid light that swallowed shadows rather than cast them. And there was Vale, making final adjustments to a control panel. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "Mr. Thorn," he said pleasantly, as if greeting me at a faculty mixer. "I've been expecting you. Though I must admit, I'm impressed you made it this far. Most people who get too close to the truth experience a sudden dip in their probability of survival. Like Emma Harrow?" I held up her notebook. "Or my own accident?" Vale's smile faltered slightly. "You have her notes. Interesting. I thought I'd been quite thorough. Not thorough enough." I stepped further into the room, Emma's ghost moving with me. "What are you doing, Vale? What's this machine for?" "Permanence," he replied simply. "Emma's equations allow for temporary probability manipulation, effective, but requiring constant maintenance. This device will make the changes permanent, a fundamental rewrite of reality itself." "You're going to erase her completely," I said, "not just from history, but from possibility." "Among other adjustments," he gestured at the machine, "my contributions to physics will become elemental, woven into the fabric of reality itself. No one will question my genius because it will have always been fundamental." "You're insane. Ambitious, perhaps." Vale turned back to the control panel. "And I'm nearly finished. In approximately 5 minutes, reality will reorganize around my new parameters. You won't even remember this conversation, Mr. Thorn. You won't remember Emma Harrow. You won't remember your suspicions. You'll simply be another admirer of my work." I lunged forward, but Vale was ready. He pressed a button on a small device similar to the one I'd seen in Emma's memory. Reality rippled around me, and suddenly my legs felt like disconnected weights. I stumbled, crashing into a table of equipment. "Probability manipulation," Vale explained casually. "I've just increased the probability of your inner ear experiencing a temporary balance failure. Nothing permanent. Yet." I struggled to my feet, fighting against a universe that suddenly found my balance improbable. "You've been using her equations for decades. Small manipulations, nudging reality in your favor." "Precisely." Vale made another adjustment. "Grant approvals, award committees, rival experiments failing at crucial moments, the mathematics of success. And now you're scaling up, making it permanent." He checked his watch. 3 minutes now. "Yes, the ultimate academic achievement, Thorn, becoming fundamental to the field itself." Emma's ghost had moved to the machine, her form growing more solid as she approached its core. The equations in her notebook began to glow, resonating with the energy of the device. "You recognized me from the beginning," I said, trying to keep Vale distracted while I inched closer. "You knew who I was when you called me in. Of course, you were a loose end, one of the few who survived my probability adjustments. When your little paranormal investigation business came to my attention, I realized you might be useful. Bring you in, let you find Emma's ghost, then activate the device. Clean up all my loose ends at once. I checked my pocket watch. The second hand had stopped. Reality anchor. Failure. Not good. She'll stop you, I croaked. Vale laughed. Emma? She's just a quantum echo, a side effect of my work. Nothing more. I wouldn't be so sure. I nodded toward the machine, where Emma's form had become almost completely solid. She placed her hands on the sphere of liquid light, and the energy patterns changed, shifting from blue-white to a deep violet. Vale's smile vanished. What is she doing? That's not possible. Probability manipulation works both ways, I said. You've been using her equations for decades. Did you really think she wouldn't understand them better than you? Emma turned toward us, her eyes radiating the same violet energy. You stole my work, Darius. You took my life, but you never fully understood the math. Vale lunged for the control panel, but reality rippled around him. He stumbled, just as I had moments before. Probability adjustment, Emma said, her voice resonating with a low thrum that shook the room. Perfect mercury cubes began to form along the cracks in the walls. Emma's words sent pulses of frosted light vectoring in all directions. I've just made your success highly improbable. The machine's energy patterns continued to shift, the sphere overloading with increasingly complex patterns. The walls of the laboratory began to warp and buckle as reality itself became unstable. You'll destroy everything, Vale shouted, frantically trying to reach the controls. No, Emma replied. Just your version of everything. The sphere of energy expanded suddenly, engulfing the entire machine. Equations wrote themselves in light across every surface, Emma's original work, asserting itself against Vale's manipulations. I recognized the patterns from her notebook, but they were evolving rapidly, building toward an impossible crescendo. Vale made one final lunge for the control panel, but I intercepted him, driving him away from the machine. We grappled briefly before a surge of raw energy, pounding stabs of frozen light, threw us both against the wall. The blast split the sole of my boot. It's too late, Emma said, her form now fully solid within the energy field. The quantum field is destabilizing. Undoing 30 years of manipulation this violently is unraveling its structure. The room shuddered. Equipment crashed to the floor, flattened and poured in all directions like a Dali original. The sphere of energy at the machine's core pulsed erratically. What's happening? I shouted over the growing roar of quantum energy. Reality correction, Emma replied. But the damage is too extensive. The quantum field is fracturing. Vale had recovered and crawled toward a secondary control panel. His face was no longer the composed mask of academic superiority. Its face had cracked open to reveal the desperate megalomaniac beneath. You don't understand what I've accomplished, he snarled, fingers scrambling over controls. I've elevated human understanding beyond what any of you could comprehend. He slammed a fist against a sparking console. These manipulations weren't just for me. They were necessary. The scientific community is blind, resistant to real innovation. I had to force progress. His eyes were wild now, sweat beading on his forehead as his carefully constructed reality collapsed around him. I deserved recognition. I deserved to reshape the laws of physics. Some truths are too important to be left to democratic consensus. Emma's spirit pulsed like a demon heart, each throb sending waves of arctic malevolence across my skin. Her mouth gaped wide enough to swallow worlds. No. The sound that erupted was like shattered stone, denting reality. This ends now. The energy sphere collapsed inward, then exploded outward in a silent wave of cosmic force. I was thrown against the far wall, momentarily blinded by the pulse of light as it lanced through every particle of my being. I seemed to die and be reborn 1,000 times in that single instant, bathed in the radiation of infinite possibilities. When my vision cleared, the laboratory had become a slaughterhouse of physics. Reality itself had been butchered and left to bleed out on the floor. Causality hung in tatters from the ceiling. The walls wept equations that evaporated into steam. The machine was destroyed, a smoking ruin of twisted metal and shattered components, its guts of wire and circuitry spilled across the floor like technological entrails. Vale lay unconscious nearby, and Emma stood in the center of the destruction, her form flickering between solid and spectral. "It's done," she said. "His manipulations are unraveling. Reality is beginning to restore itself." I struggled to my feet. "It's over?" I asked. She shook her head sadly. "Not yet. The damage is too extensive. The quantum field needs to be stabilized." "There's only one way," Emma said, her voice suddenly calm. "My final equation, quantum consciousness dispersal." I remembered a page in her notebook with that exact phrase, marked with a warning. "Dangerous. Last resort only." "The dispersal equation," I said. "That's what you're planning." "You saw it." A sad smile crossed her face. "Some equations can only be balanced with sacrifice." She looked at me with eyes that held 30 years of waiting. "I can disperse my consciousness through the quantum field. Stabilize what is broken." Understanding dawned. "You'll be trapped, fragmented across reality. Better than oblivion, and better than letting him win." Her smile contained all the bitter vindication I'd ever seen. "The truth will be revealed. My work restored. That's what matters." Something inside me twisted painfully. My hand instinctively tightened on the notebook. This ghost, this brilliant, wronged woman, had waited 3 decades for justice, only to face eternal fragmentation to clean up her murderous mess. The unfairness seared in my chest and made me gag on my own guts. "There has to be another way," I said, knowing even as I spoke that there wasn't. Her form was already beginning to splinter at the edges. "This is my choice, Nox, my equations, my responsibility." Emma then solidified somehow, became more real than reality. Her face, a roadmap of pain and purpose. Before I could protest further, she began to dissolve. Her form didn't fade. It diffracted, consciousness splintering not into light, but into possibilities, wave functions collapsing across space-time to the sound of 1,000 soft chimes. Her essence then shattered into countless shimmering fragments, each a perfect miniature of her being. Some burned with the cold fire of stellar death, others pulsed with the gentle rhythm of quantum possibility. I watched as pieces of Emma Harrow, brilliant, murdered, vindicated, scattered across dimensions. I reached out instinctively, as if I could somehow hold her together, keep her whole. My fingers passed through the fragments of her being, each contact sending jolts of knowledge and emotion through me. Flashes of her life, her discoveries, the poignant joy of solving one elegant proof, her death, her long wait in the quantum shadows. Not just her intellect, but her very essence, her fierce determination, her wonder at the universe's mysteries, her rage at what had been stolen from her. Her laughter fractured into harmonics that resonated with the fundamental frequencies of the universe. Her grief became particles that rained across realities. Her brilliance dispersed into the quantum foam, becoming part of the rules that govern existence. It was both annihilation and transcendence, the horror of being unmade and the sublime terror of becoming part of everything. No longer a ghost bound to a single point in space-time, but a distributed consciousness woven into reality itself. The air filled with mathematical symbols, equations, proofs. Emma Harrow's final paper, written across the universe. Vale groaned, regaining consciousness as his precious machine finally imploded, taking with it all his manipulations. The walls stabilized. The equations faded. My pocket watch resumed its steady ticking. In the sudden silence, I looked down at the broken man before me, his eyes vacant, staring at the wreckage. The celebrated genius, the Nobel laureate, the thief exposed at last. Emma's scattering fragments felt like echoes in the void Vale had punched through my own reality 18 years ago. A resonance I hadn't asked for. "She beat you," I said quietly. "She beat you with the truth." He looked up at me, with eyes that could no longer deny what he'd done. What happens now? I thought about Emma, fragmented across quantum reality, eternally divided. The price of justice in a world where institutions protect their own. A hollow victory that left me with a taste of ash in my mouth. "Now, the reckoning," I said, like a dead man walking. "The university will distance itself from you. Colleagues will claim they always had suspicions. Your papers will be reviewed, your awards reconsidered. You'll be erased, just like you erased her." I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "But you got off easy. You get to remain whole. She doesn't." Act 5. Fragmented Eternity. 1 week later, I stood before the memorial wall in the physics building. Emma Harrow's photograph had been restored to its rightful place, her name engraved on a fresh brass plate beneath it. The university president had made a speech full of careful phrasing about historical oversight and the importance of recognizing all contributors to scientific advancement. The department had established a scholarship in her name. Academic justice, neat and tidy. None of them knew the truth. None of them could see the flickering fragments of Emma Harrow's consciousness that permeated the building. A shimmer in the air here, a whisper of impossible math just beyond hearing, a momentary equation there, a cold spot that followed precise mathematical patterns. Everywhere and nowhere, conscious but never whole. I pressed my thumb against the scar on my palm, my personal reality anchor. The pain confirmed what I already knew. This was no victory. The institution got its tidy ending. The records were corrected, credit restored, scandal contained. No one but me would ever know that justice came at the cost of her eternal peace. As I turned to leave, the lights flickered in a pattern. Prime numbers: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. I stopped and watched the sequence complete itself. "I see you," I said quietly. My pocket watch ticked steadily in my vest pocket. I checked it. A habit now. A ritual to confirm reality. The second hand moved forward at its reliable pace, marking time in a universe where one woman's genius had been stolen and her afterlife fragmented to atone for it. I walked out of Caldwell Institute for the last time, carrying what felt like the only true memory of what had happened. Behind me, in the physics building, equations would continue to solve themselves on abandoned chalkboards. Light would occasionally bend around corners it shouldn't. Cold spots would follow mathematical progressions through empty hallways. Emma Harrow, fragmented across a reality she died to protect. Conscious, but never whole. I'd solved the case, but the true cost of intellectual theft couldn't be calculated in any ledger I knew. In the weeks that followed, Vale's disgrace was spectacular, and complete. His papers were withdrawn from journals. His awards were reconsidered. Colleagues who had once sung his praises now claimed they'd always harbored suspicions. The institution that had protected him for decades now disowned him with equal vigor. Emma's work was republished with her name restored. Textbooks were revised. The quantum probability equations that Vale had claimed as his own were now properly attributed to their true creator. Her equations sparked renewed debate in the journals. In academic circles, it was the scandal of the decade. Academic oblivion for him, quantum fragmentation for her. Justice, apparently, scaled differently depending on whether you were bound by tenure or thermodynamics. I followed the developments from a distance. My business had seen an uptick in cases. Word gets around when you expose a fraud of Vale's magnitude. Institutions with suspicious deaths in their past suddenly became very interested in clearing their paranormal slate before someone like me came knocking uninvited. But I couldn't shake the hollowness of it all. The academic world congratulated itself on correcting a historical injustice, never acknowledging the inconvenient truth that the correction came 30 years too late. They celebrated Emma Harrow's genius while being entirely unaware of her final sacrifice. 3 months after the Caldwell case, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing an equation I recognized from Emma's notebook, but modified, evolved, and below it, a note in handwriting I didn't recognize. Some fragments find each other. Not whole, but not alone. Observation collapses possibility, but observation is a choice. Look for me in the mathematics. That night, I dreamed of equations that rewrote themselves, of a woman whose consciousness was scattered across reality like stars in the night sky, of fragments finding each other, forming new patterns of logic in the constellations. I woke to find frost on my bedroom window, forming the clear shape of a prime number sequence. Yes, the universe has teeth, but sometimes, just sometimes, it also has justice, even if that justice comes at a terrible price. I keep Emma's notebook in my desk drawer now. Sometimes, late at night, I open it and watch as the equations subtly shift and evolve on their own. The mathematics of a consciousness that refused to be erased even when fragmented across reality. Some cases you solve, some cases solve you. The quantum phantasm taught me that justice and victory aren't always the same thing. That sometimes the truth is both vindicating and heartbreaking. But mostly, it taught me to check my pocket watch, to press my thumb against the scar on my palm, to anchor myself, because if observation collapses possibility, maybe looking away was the only kindness left. And so you rematerialize, drawn back from the quantum flux into our shared digital space. Do take a moment to allow your personal reality to stabilize. A fascinating resolution, wouldn't you agree? Miss Harrow achieves a rather permanent cosmic vindication, while Professor Vale faces near terrestrial disgrace, leaving poor Knox holding the paradox. Justice, it seems, possesses a certain capricious asymmetry. Tell me, my discerning listeners, what aspect of this reality-bending tale captured your imagination? The investigator's resolve, the villain's hubris, or the heroine's tragic apotheosis? Your responses below are duly noted and catalogued, contributing valuable metrics to my ongoing nocturnal analysis. The Codex thrives on understanding precisely which elements most inflame your imaginations. Farewell, my children of the night. Until next time, this is Nocturne saying, sweet dreams, or perhaps something rather more unsettling.